Hello, women and other. If you didn't already know, the Game Awards happened, and of course, nobody is happy. Especially not Half-Life fans, who have, in the wake of, nothing, have begun worshipping Satan on Reddit and generally losing touch with reality. Frankly, I think we should all aspire to this level of schizophrenia. For those of you not in the loop or haven't watched my last video on the topic, shameless plug, a decent chunk of the Half-Life community were convinced that Half-Life 3 was going to be announced at this year's Game Awards. Their evidence? Dude, trust me.
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
This is because the Valve game currently being developed, codenamed HLX, is probably maybe close to the end of development, but what exactly that means or whether or not that's true, who the fuck knows. HLX is also probably Half-Life 3. People lost their fucking minds at the possibility that it was going to be announced at some big gaming event like the Game Awards. It seems to me like the Half-Life community was just sort of blinded by how cool the concept of this was. They didn't really think about how the evidence for this prediction was, once again, dude, trust me.
I made it the fuck up.
Look, I don't want to gloat, even though I was one of the few people who made videos about how it probably won't happen. Instead, I want to talk about the response to my last video. I know that's a little bit trite, but it's interesting, trust me. If you look at a comment under my video that was made the day before the Game Awards, and then look at one a day after, it is both sad and hilarious. But that's not what I want to talk about necessarily. I don't want to make fun of any of these people because, they got swept up in a hype train. Who hasn't? Me. I never have. Instead, I want to use this as a learning experience. A way of analyzing and inoculating ourselves of this particular strand of brain leprosy. Without further ado, let's move on to Platitude 1. Half-Life Alyx was originally going to be announced at the Game Awards, but they cancelled it at the last minute. To my understanding, the part about Half-Life Alyx potentially being announced at the Game Awards is true for the most part, but this argument fails to take into consideration a few things. A, if being revealed at a large gaming event was so important to Valve, they would have just waited for the next one to come around. In fairness, the pandemic would have affected this to a decent degree, but Valve wouldn't have been aware of this at the time. And a lot of gaming events still happened over the pandemic. They were just shifted to a remote capacity as opposed to, being a big live event, being streamed on Twitch, that sort of thing. B, what lesson do you all think Valve would have learned from this whole thing? Because assuming they were really gung-ho about a TGA announcement, the fact that their announcement on Twitter also managed to get a significant amount of press, making the release of HLA a monumental and historic gaming event in and of itself? Do you really think Valve would ever bother with a big flashy gaming reveal ever again? Especially when they know that that's not really gonna matter in their case, because they can just make a tweet and do the exact same thing? And finally, C, this argument is actually a lie. I tricked you. I bamboozled you, led astray, duped you even. Upon reflection, I'm like 70% sure that this story is just made up. I could be wrong. I see it repeated a lot, even by some people who are like close to Valve, maybe, potentially. And I'm not going to say that I have any like behind the scenes evidence or anything, but just looking at the dates that all of these things happened, I don't buy it, man. I can safely bet that Valve never had any real desire to show HLA at the Game Awards. Let's just look at the dates that all of these things happened. HLA was announced via tweet on November 19th, 2019, and the Game Awards that year were on December 13th, 2019. Now, you could argue that they didn't have a trailer ready, so they couldn't do it, which is usually what a lot of people say is the reason. However, that doesn't really make sense, because Half-Life Alyx's trailer was released less than a week after this announcement. So, do you really think Valve couldn't have just held out a month and dropped the trailer at the TGA if they really wanted to? No, I'm sorry, I don't believe it. However, while we're on the topic of Half-Life Alyx, Platitude 1.5, the ending of Half-Life Alyx. A few people brought up the ending of Half-Life Alyx as a way of refuting some of the things I said in my last video. Spoilers for Half-Life Alyx, by the way. Skip to this time code if you want to. The ending of Half-Life Alyx, in broad strokes, involves Alyx Vance resurrecting through temporal shenanigans Eli Vance. It's weird. It's a massive twist for the series. But after all that, a scene plays out where Gordon Freeman, main character of every subsequent mainline game, picks up his iconic crowbar as a now-alive Eli says, Now this pretty clearly sets up a new direction for both the franchise as well as the general direction that a new Half-Life game could go in. And in a meta sense, this is Valve basically telling the audience, hey, we want to continue the Half-Life series, and we got plans on how to do that, which is pretty cool. But in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't mean much. Don't get me wrong, it's a big thing to have happened, but the reality is, there's always been a significant portion of Valve that's wanted to continue the Half-Life series and had some plan on how to go about it, but the issue is that those plans always fell through or never got implemented, or the team could never get an amount of momentum going, or some other complication happened that just stopped the whole project dead in its tracks. Until recently. Maybe. Probably. Hopefully? Probably. Platitude 2. The Steam Machine is coming out next year, so Half-Life 3 could be a launch title for it. Yeah, maybe. I didn't see this specific argument much in my own comment section, but I did see it around in other places like Reddit or Twitter, and I'm gonna be honest, I don't get it. Like, yeah, Half-Life 3 could be released with the Steam Machine, so what? What does this have to do with the Game Awards? People would say this in response to people being skeptical about the Game Awards. I don't understand why. Just because a launch title exists, that doesn't mean that it will be announced anytime other than when the console launches. This holds literally no bearing over whether or not the game will be announced anytime soon. In fact, it kind of implies that HLX could be announced sometime next year, closer to the Steam Machine's release date. Why would it be announced at an awards show in 2025? That doesn't make sense. Platitude 3. Sure, be skeptical of when it'll be announced, but HLX is definitely Half-Life 3. This one is basically just a misunderstanding. A lot of people seem to think that I am of the opinion that HLX is absolutely not Half-Life 3, which is fair. When I was talking about this general skepticism that I have in my last video, I didn't go into a lot of detail about it, and the stuff I said in that section wasn't particularly clear. But to clarify, that segment was designed more so to point out how little we know for certain about HLX, not me making the claim that HLX isn't Half-Life 3. While I personally am not going to count my chickens before they hatch, going off of the credible leaks we've gotten for HLX, it does look like it's probably Half-Life 3 in some form or another. At least that's the obvious takeaway from the information that's been data mined. Just as a matter of principle, I'm not gonna get excited until we have something a little more concrete than just an HEV suit gets mentioned in the files somewhere. Now, I know we have a little bit more than that, but still, I like being cautious. I'm sorry. If you want my full, genuine opinion, it's more likely to be Half-Life 3 than other things, but we don't know for sure. Platitude 4. So, there's this rocket that Valve is, like, kinda funding, and it's called Rise and Shine. Okay, I'm gonna be honest, this is the dumbest one that I heard, and I heard it a lot. If you aren't in the circles that were regularly discussing HLX being at the Game Awards for that one singular week, you might think this is a joke. To my understanding, it's not. Basically, a company called Rocket Lab, which I think is partially funded by Valve, maybe, happened to schedule a rocket launch on the same day as the Game Awards. And that rocket just so happened to be called Rise and Shine, which is a reference to the first line of Half-Life 2, you know, maybe. since it's also just a phrase people say. Look, people were fully convinced that this had something to do with HLX, unironically, to my understanding. They thought that this rocket launch was planned to correspond with the Game Awards for some reason, an announcement maybe, but why would it have something to do with a rocket? Nobody ever came up with how these two things were related, but people were convinced that they were. Even if the name was intentional, like as a reference to Half-Life, don't you think it's more likely that just one of the eggheads who work at Rocket Lab was just a fan of Half-Life? If this was all some big planned out publicity stunt, you'd think Valve would have come up with like a better, less confusing tie-in with the Half-Life franchise and like rockets. I don't know that Half-Life has rockets in it, but like, I don't know, what if you called it like White Forest or something? That would be a more sensible name, assuming it was a deliberate tie-in. I could spend all day breaking down how dumb this singular argument is, and was, but we'd be missing the point. The fact is, all this hype that evolved around the Game Awards just led people to believe more and more outlandish things until eventually it all exploded. It's a brainworm that rots your ability to think reasonably. And I'm not trying to tell you not to be excited for HLX, or any other game for that matter, except once again, I am never excited for anything. Just don't let that excitement that you have blind you and make you turn into a satanic schizo, shadowboxing with the men in the walls and somehow still losing. I want to be clear, HLX is coming out. I don't want anyone to think that I'm saying it won't be coming out. The fact that the game has survived multiple winter breaks means that it is going to come out at some point, but when I made a joke about Valve just shadow dropping HL3 randomly in my last video, that wasn't really a joke. That's not only possible, but honestly pretty likely, given the fact that this game has been hyped up for almost 2 decades. If Half-Life 3 got released, the reality is most of the marketing for it is just gonna be inherent to its existence. Like, virtually every gaming outlet, and probably several news companies, are going to cover it, thus giving it an insane amount of free advertising. And on top of that, the fact that people are currently hyped for it, without it even having a trailer, should, give you some perspective. And on top of all of that, Valve literally owns Steam. They can make a big banner over the store page that says Half-Life 3 out now, and literally everyone will see it. People seem to keep forgetting that Valve is both a very unique and exceptional company when it comes to the world of video games. Their deck is so stacked, they're barely playing poker anymore. When HLX or Half-Life 3 or whatever finally drops, they won't need a big reveal trailer. They'll just need you. I'm pointing, you can't see it. I want to end this video on a positive note because I feel like my last video was seen as super negative and I don't like that. But the fact of the matter is, nobody outside of Valve knows anything, and if they tell you that they do, you should probably take it with a grain of salt at most. Nobody knows when this game is going to be announced, much less when it's going to be released, but it's going to be coming out at some point. It's only a matter of time. And when it does come out, it'll probably be at least a 6 out of 10, which is good. Anyway, I hope you all had a good Christmas. I'm currently recording this on December 30th, just before New Year's Eve, and I really hope that I'm going to be able to get it out on New Year's Eve, but I don't know if I will. Anyway, if you liked this video, remember to like and subscribe. If you didn't like this video, remember to dislike and subscribe. If you had no opinion on this video, remember to PayPal me $100 or else I'll flens your cat. Hopefully I'll make some actually good videos in 2026, okay? Because I know I was sort of slacking this year. But I make no promises, and also you can't tell me what to do. Happy New Year. May your bed be cold and your dreams wet.